Now, you mentioned you tried pretty much every flavor of real estate investing. And I'm sure there are listeners out there who are like, oh my gosh, I'm in the middle of that process. I'm trying to figure out which path is best for me. So give us some of the highs and lows and how you eventually figured out what path was right for you.
I don't know if there's a best path. To be honest, I think most people, and I've had an evolution of thought about this over the last few years. I think most people are best starting out finding an investor, finding a fund, finding a syndication and doing that. And I don't run a fund. I don't run a syndication. Now you guys run a great one, but there's the passive side of things because most people don't have the time or don't really want to spend the time. Right. And so I think the majority of people that I connect with and attract, because I'm an active investor, I attract active investors that are control freaks like me that want to actually learn how to manage and control the deal and things like that. So if you're in that, maybe 5% of people that fall into that category, then I think finding the deal is very important. So that's always a skill set. So a lot of people look at the wholesale side of things. I'm not a wholesaler, but I had to learn how to be a wholesaler starting out because all that is finding deals and understanding that not every deal you find is for you. So everyone is really a wholesaler to start. I think everyone needs to know how to flip, whether you ever want to flip ever. That is an important skill set, even if you're just doing a rental properties. My favorite type of investment is the BRRRR strategy. And a very important part of the BRRRR strategy is renovating. And really, you're running a flip. You're just selling it to yourself. And if I did not do flips up until that point, I would not have been able to do that as well. So I think it's thinking about it in asset classes more than anything. Are you going to stay in the single family, maybe the small multifamily side of things, or are you going to jump up to commercial or something bigger? And it really, I think it's like, what is your passion? Like, what does your personality tell you that you'd be having the most fun doing? And if it all sounds terrible, then just go find someone else to do it for you. But if you're like, yes, I want to get in, I want to actually like knock down that wall, and sure, I'm going to get someone to do it at some point, but I want to get involved. That's your passion at the moment. And it changes, right? Every 5 years, I kind of reevaluate of what I actually want to do with my life and my time. And it's different every time I reevaluate.
I wanted to kind of back up a little bit because it's when I was actually looking at buying condos in Hawaii before I got into what I do now. And this was probably about like 6 or 7 years ago. And, because stuff was so cheap. And when I say so cheap, I mean, you could get a condo in Waikiki for like $100,000, right? And I was like, should I buy it? Should I not buy it? And I went and I looked at so many, flew home, looked at a bunch of properties and never like pulled the trigger. I'm curious because there's so many different things, especially when looking at condos. If anyone out there is thinking about looking at a condo, what are some of the tips, some of the advice you may have? Because I know a lot of things that I learned. One of the biggest things is in Hawaii, especially, is looking at the land ownership, right, versus the leasehold. And if you don't pay attention to that, you're going to find yourself just owning a lease instead of actually owning the property, which is why sometimes the properties are so cheap, which took me some time to even discover that. I didn't even know. And like you said, not a lot of real estate agents even knew how to tell me that. As an investor, they didn't know how to look at it that way. They just thought, oh, you want to buy a condo in your price point? Well, here's one. Here's a good one. But if anyone out there might be thinking about the same thing, because I know Hawaii real estate is like nuts right now, what is kind of your thoughts around the condo thing and how to approach that for a newbie?
I mean, that's such a great point, right? So the leasehold versus fee simple. I mean, if you're looking at just the MLS or in Zillow, you see LS, LH or FS. And if you don't know what it is, you don't know what it is, right? There's fees. You're like, all right, those must be condo fees. You're paying a leasehold fee, but it's almost like ground rent. But what most people don't know is it expires at some point, meaning you don't own it anymore. Yes. You don't own it anymore. That's how it's $100,000 or a 60, like, so it's actually a depreciating asset, which is crazy. Yes. But a lot of Hawaii is like that. And I grew up with that. So that's like the radar. And when I moved to other markets, that's one of the first I asked them, like, do you own the land as well? And people thought I was crazy. Like, of course you own the land. What do you mean? How would you own a home and not own the land? That's just what it is in Hawaii. So understanding fee simple versus leasehold, I will say leasehold can be a profitable business if you cash flow it well enough and you spec it out, but it's not the same type of investment like long-term real estate investing. And then right now, the the big thing everywhere is short-term vacation rentals, right? And it's always been a big thing in Hawaii. There's so many limitations, and in Hawaii, probably more than ever, they're trying to limit the ability to do short-term rentals, which is tough. And it's hard to cash flow in Hawaii without that ability. But there are some buildings that have the built-in ability to do short-term rentals, and they're called condos. So they are condo hotel buildings, and like an outrigger, like one of these hotels, you might not know, but like 20% of it is owned by like individual owners, and they decide to put their unit in the hotel pool and have the hotel management company rent it out for them, or they can rent it out themselves, or they can live there, right? So you have those options. And if you're buying in a condo hotel, that gives you the ability to do that short-term rental in most cases. And that's the flexibility that is hard to come by right now. Now, if you go down that route, any sort of condos, you're running into extra layers of restrictions for financing. There's not a lot of banks that like to finance condo hotels. And so it's understanding how to find those financing, or getting really good at creative financing, seller financing, and things like that, because those sellers might have a hard time getting the price that they know it should be worth. But most buyers are not qualified for traditional financing to buy a condo hotel, or instead of 20% down, they need to put down 40% down. And now the investor's saying, I don't know if I like those numbers. So I think understanding the differences between those, and then the financing tied to each of those options.